Hey, what's up everybody? Chris here, and today I want to talk about why Nintendo is my favorite video game company. Hey, if you like the channel, if you're enjoying the content, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and please be sure to subscribe. Now, I do think I should say right off the bat that Nintendo is not perfect. They do a number of things that absolutely drive me up the wall. The online system for the Nintendo Switch is lackluster, to say the least. You know, even though Nintendo is really hell-bent on sort of doing their own thing, if they would incorporate an achievement or a trophy system, if they would have integrated voice chat with their games, this would go an infinitely long way toward making it a more robust service and one that people are eager to buy into. As it stands, their online service is mediocre at best, right? I mean, the voice chat app that you have on a mobile device is okay, but why use that when you really can just, call or FaceTime someone that you know that you want to play with? In addition to that, even though the price of the service is a little bit less than what you would get with something like Xbox Live Gold or even Game Pass, I suppose, even though Game Pass is the best deal in gaming in my opinion, or PSN, you don't get new Nintendo Switch games included monthly with that. Instead, you get NES games, you get Super NES games, and some of these are great. Don't get me wrong, I think it's awesome to have things like Mario Bros. 3 on my Switch and to be able to pick that up and play it whenever I want. But still, as someone who wants to play things that are just coming out on the system, it can be a little bit aggravating to see what Nintendo's doing or not doing in that regard. In addition, they never put their first-party games on sale, ever. Or if they do, it's maybe a $5 discount or at most a $10 discount, and we're talking about games that have been out for years. Now, this is not in any way related to Skyward Sword, right? We just had that Nintendo Direct. A lot of people were all up in arms about the fact that Skyward Sword is going to be $60. I'm actually totally fine with that. I think a lot of people didn't play that game or had a bias toward that game because they didn't even give it a shot because they heard everyone complain about the motion controls. The fact that it's being remastered and they've tweaked the controls and all of that, to me, it is worth $60. It's a $60 game. It's a fantastic title, and it's actually one of my favorite Zelda games, so this is in no way a commentary on that recent development. But all that to say, Nintendo is not perfect, but if someone backed me into a corner and said, okay, you can only have one game console or one console from a gaming company for the rest of your life, you've got to pick one now, who's it going to be? I would always go with Nintendo. And again, don't get me wrong, I love Xbox. I love PlayStation. Again, Halo was one of my favorite franchises. I don't know what I would do if I didn't have access to Halo multiplayer. It would be a crushing thing, even though I guess I could do that on PC. And with PlayStation, God of War is one of my favorite franchises. I think it's a fantastic series of games. The most recent God of War that came out on the PS4, I think is just a masterful experience. And I think the upcoming God of War game, Ragnarok, is going to be equally amazing. I have no reason to doubt that it wouldn't be. And again, Sony has great first-party games. I played through The Last of Us Part 2 and really enjoyed it, even though I didn't really get that deeply invested in the first game, and that's a whole other story for another time. But I did really like The Last of Us Part 2. I love the Uncharted series. I think those are great. So again, Sony's got great first-party games. Microsoft, I think, is working on that. There's some stuff coming with Fable and some other titles. But even though I loved Microsoft and Sony, I would have to pick Nintendo above all else. I think this comes down to a handful of things to think about. One for me is nostalgia, right? I'm almost 40 years old. I grew up with the NES, the N64. I actually had a Sega Genesis instead of a Super Nintendo, but I have since played a lot of Super Nintendo games. But, all of those titles really shaped how I look at the gaming world today, and they still stand out as some of the best games that I've ever played. The other big thing with Nintendo that I think, honestly, Sony and Microsoft could learn a lot about has to do with just straight up innovation. I think with PS4 and PS5 and Xbox, you kind of know what you're getting with the next generation of consoles, right? You know it's going to be stronger, there's going to be more horsepower, better graphics, all that sort of stuff. With Nintendo, you never know what's coming down the pike. And I like that they're not afraid to try new things. Even though, I think objectively the Wii U was totally a failure, no one would argue with that. I loved it. I thought it was a great console. I think it's highly underrated even today. But I love that Nintendo's not scared to try new things. I mean, when you think about the Switch on paper, and I'm sure when they pitched it internally, there may have been a little bit of sort of pushback on the idea of, okay, it's trying to be two things at once. Is that going to backfire against us? We really need a hit after the way the Wii U struggled. But the Switch has turned out to be one of my favorite consoles of all time. I typically don't collect physical media when it comes to games, or at least I've trended that direction, with the most recent generation of consoles, but I always collect Nintendo stuff because I love to go back and replay games years later. And the way the Switch has merged, the option of having sort of detachable Joy-Cons if you want to go that route, being able to sit in a chair with a Joy-Con in each hand and sort of play the game that way is really kind of revolutionary. But I think having a hybrid console that does both things really well. It's a great home system for playing it on a TV. It's a great system for taking it on a trip, on the go, on an airplane, wherever you may be. It's just a testament to how well Nintendo has sort of refined who they are as a gaming company over the years. To me, the Switch is sort of the pinnacle of, you know, on the one hand, you've had the Game Boy Advance, the DS, the 3DS, all of that. And then, you know, the NES, the Super Nintendo, the 64, the Wii, all of these things sort of merging into one kind of master system, right? That I think does everything pretty much perfectly, again, with the caveat that their online system obviously is not the best. But when you look at their first party games, right? We're talking Mario, we're talking Zelda, we're talking Metroid, all of these things. To me, Nintendo still has the best first party games. Now, again, this is an area where Nintendo falters a little bit. I wish they would show some of their series a little more love. I'd love to see, for example, a new F-Zero game. But when a new Zelda's on the way, a new mainline Mario game is on the way, or even something like Mario Golf, which just got announced at their most recent Nintendo Direct, I become really excited about this because they always find a way to reinvent themselves, and they always make their games interesting. And in my opinion, it's almost always, I should say, an improvement on the previous iteration. So as we move into the next generation and potentially look to something like a Switch Pro, which who knows what that's going to look like or when it's going to come, probably within the next year to 2 years. The Switch is selling like hotcakes, as they say, so they probably don't have a ton of incentive to switch things up, no pun intended, at this point. But it's going to come sooner rather than later because they're going to have to change their hardware to keep up with the most recent gaming demands. I guess unless they decide to do more cloud gaming, which is a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. But I just know that Nintendo is going to do something somewhat unexpected maybe. They're going to, you know, create games that people are going to love. And again, if I had to pick among all the consoles, if I could only just choose one, it would almost always be Nintendo because they just know how to make things that are fun. They know how to make, in general, their fan base happy. Okay, so that's not always the case. Clearly, there are certain things people want that we haven't gotten yet, be it Metroid Prime 4, you know, a lot of stuff for the Zelda 35th anniversary. Everybody's complaining about that right now. But on the whole, Nintendo, I think, is just a company that, you know, sort of pushes out all the extraneous noise and focuses on what they want to do, which is make really fun games, regardless of horsepower and graphics and all of that. And again, their games do look beautiful, in my opinion. When you think about Yoshi's Crafted World or Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild or whatever it may be, they make really great looking games, but above all else, they're fun. And that's why I love Nintendo. Of course, this is just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinion about who your favorite video game company is. If you would, leave that in the comments below and we'll have a little bit of a discussion about it. As always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more content on the way soon.